Operation Dibri, as some of you may know, is a long-running, tried investigation into the activities of the Tottenham Mandem, the TMD. There is intelligence to suggest that Mark Duggan is currently in possession or control of about 3 firearms, and he's looking to take possession of a firearm perhaps this evening. He's been trying to do it for a few days.
Strict reminder for the firearms officers. Listen in, guys. A firearm is to be fired only as a last resort. Other methods must have been tried and failed.
That's it. So what? Just wait there, yeah? Ah, cool. Funny. Not much, yeah. Oh, easy. Yeah, ah, cool. Boss, man.
We're on him.
Thanks. Okay, Duggan confirmed in possession of a firearm. Can my team go?
He's mating! It's gone! Medipack!
The police shooting of Mark Duggan in August 2011 triggered the worst riots in modern British history.
People died in those riots, so that's one thing that absolutely raises the Duggan shooting up above others.
There is still no agreement about what actually happened when Duggan was stopped by armed police on that summer's day.
That 3 to 5 seconds of history has far too many different versions for anyone to say one version is any truer than another version.
An inquest jury decided that Mark Duggan was not holding a gun when he was shot, but that it was a lawful killing because the officer who fired honestly believed there was a gun in his hand. The body that investigates the police, the IPCC, found that Mark Duggan was holding a gun, but that he was throwing it as he was shot. There's even less agreement about who Mark Duggan really was. Highly dangerous gangster or ordinary family man. More than 5 years on, the story is wrapped up in secret intelligence, the existence of which cannot even be acknowledged, leading to a suspicion that the truth is being hidden.
If it was a member of my family that had been shot and the answer from the official body investigating was, well, we know the answer, but we can't tell you, yeah, I would find that incredibly frustrating, and I wouldn't trust it either.
The whole function of intelligence must be the prevention of crime and the prevention of death, if at all possible. So it seems to me these are vital questions that have remained unanswered.
Something is amiss here. Something's not quite right here. So what is the truth?
This film tries to get closer to the truth through personal testimony and official records.
Lawful 2-2, we've got Duggan in the car.
Dramatized scenes are based on what is known about the movements of Mark Duggan and the police who were tracking him over the 24 hours leading up to the shooting. The Metropolitan Police chose not to participate in the making of this film, but we hear the officers' own words by dramatizing their inquest transcripts.
Stafford, the people here are still very animated about it, they're still passionate. What's driving them on to keep fighting for Mark Duggan?
We have no alternative. We went to an inquest and we heard the police's accounts. We heard their version. And subsequent to that inquest, we found out lots more that throws real doubt on their account. The first phone call I got, I was told that the police on Ferry Lane and shot a young black guy who had come out of a car, armed, and was pointing his gun to shoot it at them. My instant response was, that's tough, isn't it? If you play by the sword, you die by the sword. If you're crazy enough to draw a gun and go and attack the police officers and they shoot you and kill you, cool. Oh well.
Ladies and gents, I'm Zulu 51. I'm a DI from Trident, and we're all here today on Operation Dibri. The date is Wednesday, the 3rd of August, and the time by my watch is 10 minutes past 6 in the evening. This is
Trident, a metropolitan police unit tasked with tackling gun crime, was then over 2 years in to a long-running operation codenamed Dibri.
Operation Dibri, it was an operation that was tackling an organised criminal network, organised criminal gang known as TMD. In more layman's terms, it's Tottenham Man Den. They were involved in the supply of firearms or use of firearms and drugs, the supply of Class A drugs. As well as that, they would be involved in a number of murders and attempted murders and conflict with other organised criminal gangs, which, from opposing areas, basically.
We received daily briefings that the TMD had been involved in numerous fatal and non-fatal shootings, kidnappings, the supply of Class A drugs within London, and they had been involved in stops where they've actually made determined attempts to escape, discarded firearms, they've been very surveillance aware and so on.
There are a large number of subjects and associates on this operation. There are, I think, 6 that have been put on the briefing for tonight who may become relevant for tonight or for the rest of the week. My job was really as a detective sergeant on the proactive team, the day-to-day running of my team and receiving and assessing intelligence and running the day-to-day response to that intelligence, working to Mr. Foote, the SIO. If I come back to Mark Duggan, the picture on there is quite a good likeness. He's got a baby mother with children who live at, which is just off. He does frequent that address on a daily basis.
Operation Dibri had been implemented before I'd attended Trident or deployed to Trident. And during that time, I understand there was around 100 subjects that were part of that through research. But the core, if you like, of that group were around 48 members. And they were considered the most violent people in London. And not only in London, but outside London, stretching across to Europe because of the importation of drugs and involvement in that aspect. And they were closely linked to Turkish criminal organisations as well.
There was the intriguing bit in the inquest where the cop said he was on a list and he was amongst the 48 most dangerous gangsters in all of Europe, which seemed a remarkably precise number.
There is intelligence to suggest that Mark Duggan is currently in possession or control of about 3 firearms and that he's looking to take possession of a firearm perhaps this evening. He's been trying to do it for a few days.
The intelligence over that period and historically was clear indication that Mr. Duggan was involved in gun crime. As well as gun crime, he was involved in the supply of Class A drugs and possession of ammunition as well. All of those are obviously very serious crimes.
Mark Duggan had a criminal record for 2 minor convictions: possession of cannabis and receiving stolen goods. But intelligence held on the police national computer and the Metropolitan Police's own systems linked him to serious offences, including suspicion of firing weapons and arrests in connection with attempted murder and murder. That intelligence was rated according to the police's own evaluation method, which grades intelligence from A1 for a highly reliable source down to E5, which could be comparable to something overheard in a pub.
So you'll have, for example, E, be untested, unreliable, unknown, and 4 or 5 would be. It could be malicious, that type of grading, to sort of A1, A2, like that. So it's sort of a letter and number system. Does that make sense?
Mark Duggan.
The only intelligence relating to Mark Duggan where the grading was ever revealed was a report that he had been in possession of a handgun. That was graded as E4.
E4 sits quite low because it would be something that's either untested, cannot be judged intelligence.
The grading of the other intelligence was never made public. But by the summer of 2011, Mark Duggan was under what the police call directed surveillance.
Directed surveillance means that, basically as a police state, a law enforcement agency, we have powers to intrude on people's privacy. And that comes under a legislation called RIPPA, the Regulatory Investigative Police Powers Act. The idea for that power is to allow us to conduct surveillance on people that are involved in criminality.
My understanding of RIPPA is pretty limited. I'm just a lay person, and it's very difficult to get a deep understanding of it because the officials always say that they're not allowed to speak about it, not allowed to speak about its existence, and not allowed to tell you if RIPPA legislation is impacting on their investigation. So RIPPA is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. So if they're bugging phones, if they're using listening devices, if GCHQ is on you, these are things that we're not allowed to have public discussion and debate about. And officials are not allowed to even speak about it. RIPPA is the beginning of secret courts and secret legislation.
The RIPPA intelligence on Mark Duggan was so secret that an ordinary coroner couldn't chair the inquest into his death. Instead, a senior judge with high enough security clearance to see the intelligence had to be appointed. The picture of Mark Duggan, painted by the police intelligence, was very different to that given by his family and friends.
This is a bike that Mark bought Kimani for his birthday. And this is Mark on the bike. I am Mark Duggan's baby mother. I have 3 children for him. We started going out on my 16th birthday. This is when Kalia was born. Oh, this is a good one. This is when Mark was getting a tattoo. He was trying to pretend that it wasn't hurting him, but it was. My first memories of Mark, he used to have this big curly afro. Big curly afro.
I knew Mark from when he was born. He grew up with my son. He grew up in Broadwater Farm Estate, which, you know, your kids played out and everybody played together, this, that, and the other. Mark rode with many young people that he grew up with in the community. They were all young kids growing up together. Maybe 1 or 2 of them a bit hyperactive, but not to an extent where I would say they were a danger to this community.
Even growing up, he was like more into girls. From an early age himself, he was into girls. When he realized that he was cute, everybody started to say, oh, he's so cute. He just went on a different one. It was like, everybody fancies me.
All you hear is just from the media, bad-mouthing the Broadwater Farm Estate. And it's totally not like that. Everyone looks out for each other on that estate. And I had a good childhood there, and I am proud to say that's where I come from. But I always knew from I was a child that, how can I put it? When I saw police, I knew it was trouble. It's always a case of the police are here, what are they here for? They're coming to cause some form of trouble. And that's how I saw it. That's how it's always been.
There's been a big, long-running theme over decades about the police and their relationship with the communities they serve. We see a series of riots across urban Britain, culminating in the Broadwater Farm riot in Tottenham in 1985. Vicious rioting.
On the night of October the 6th, 1985, 500 policemen faced petrol bombs, bottles, bricks, machetes, axes, knives and guns. More than 200 were injured. Police Constable Keith Blakelock was hacked to death.
The killing of PC Blakelock in the 1985 riot on Broadwater Farm was perhaps the most traumatic single event in the recent history of the Metropolitan Police. He was a, by all accounts, exemplary community beat officer hacked to death in the most savage circumstances, his head almost severed. There were all sorts of myths and beliefs and ideologies around that event. And then when, after a farce of an original trial at which fabricated evidence led to the wrongful conviction of 3 people, this only added to the soreness of the wound that Tottenham and Broadwater Farm represented within the Metropolitan Police Service.
So this block here was Tangemere, and up on the first floor was the mezzanine floor. It's where the few supermarkets and shops, resources that were available to this estate were actually based. PC Blakelock came to his end down there. So for the Metropolitan Police Service, that's what makes this estate a symbolic location.
It's a symbolic location of the conflict between black communities and the police. It's a place where so many past wrongs, past wounds on both sides are stored up. It's the powder keg waiting for the piece of tinder. That's the context that you have to put Mark Duggan's death into.
There are very few angels on Broadwell Farm. I've walked those corridors many a time and I've not bumped into an angel. So you get young people who come together. And because they're grown on an identifiable estate, they sometimes get territorial. This is my area. So they become crews. They're not gangs. Gangs are structured organizations with a hierarchy, a leadership, when they all have the same objective, which normally is about money. These are groups of kids who create a bond and they create a camaraderie, but they're not gangsters. Do I know any Mr. Biggs in the community? Maybe. Maybe. It definitely weren't Mark.
I'm 8 years senior to Mark, so I've seen a lot more gangs before his time. If I go back 2003, 4, 5, now we're talking about a different generation of Tottenham man then. What was going on then was shootings, kidnappings, tortures. These men then were walking with firearms. Crime was being done, shots were fired in the air. Bah, 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 bah. Everybody run. Nobody would tell the police nothing. You tell the police you're liable to get shot tomorrow. The Tottenham man them, dead, prison, in church right now. It's Mark and his little friends on Broadwater Farm that grew up there and that have had to carry the burden of PC Blake Club all these years and being criminalised because that's where they were born and grown, being styled up as now Tottenham man them. They're not.
Mark grew up in the aftermath of the PC Blakelock killing, but he didn't spend his whole childhood on the estate.
We used to go to school on Broadwater Farm. When he went into the big school, he didn't settle. He wasn't bad, he was just not conforming. The change in him wasn't positive the way I saw it. So I was there one day and I just said to him, I said, wouldn't you like to come and live in Manchester for a while? And he just said, yeah.
He took school a bit more seriously and wanted to get grades. Then he returned back to London.
When Mark went back to London, him and Simone got together, and then it wasn't long before they moved in.
Mark had a shop on the farm, Broadwater Farm Estate, selling clothes. He also done nightclub promoting, and that's how he made his money.
He did everything late. He never partied until he was in his 20s, because he was 20 when they had Kamani. So he just wanted to be a family man, you know, he just wanted to have kids and have a proper family. So he didn't start partying, going out till maybe he was about 23, something like that.
Just kind of out in the clubs and stuff like that, his face was popping up quite a lot. And we kind of connected from there, like, started kind of talking about doing parties and stuff, kind of built a relationship from there.
Mark and his friends called themselves the Star Gang, but according to those who knew him, this was just a name they used when they were out at the clubs and parties, not a gang in a criminal sense.
He was a player. Okay, a player is a womanizer. A gangster is somebody that goes around and hurts people. He was a womanizer. He's not an angel. If you came to fight him, he would fight you, but he's not like how they make out, like, yeah, he rolled around with a gun all the time, and it's nothing like that.
Do you think he rolled around with a gun ever?
No, there was a gun in the car, they said, so he must have rolled around with it at some time.
That would be the million-dollar question here. I haven't got a clue why he had a gun. There's tons of reasons why. Like, he could have been transporting it, could have been delivering it. That's one thing I couldn't speculate on.
Ultimately, he may have been a big crim, he may not have been a big crim. What's not in doubt is on the day in question, he's being followed because they think he's going to get a weapon, and he does.
In 2011, Mark's sister Kay discovered that he was associating with someone who had a serious criminal past involving guns.
Mark called me up one day and he says, I'm with one of your brethrens, you know? And I said, my friend? Who's my friend that you're with? I thought it was a girl. So he said, Kevin.
There's some more photos coming round, these black and white ones, which is a guy called Kevin Hutchinson Foster. Intelligence would suggest that he's got control of the firearms, and from 9 o'clock this evening, there may well be a plan for Duggan to somehow get those firearms from Hutchinson.
Mr. Foster, Kevin Hutchinson Foster. I've known that name for a long time. He was a friend of my ex-partner. He is known for gang-associated things. So when Mark let me know that he was kind of associated with this guy, I was immediately telling Mark, this man is notorious. He's already in firearms, drugs, that world. I don't know my little brother to be that. So for him to be saying he's going to be friends with him, you can't be his friend. You can't be. That's a whole different world from where you are. What's the connection? Football. I know Kevin plays football, so that is a connection. I couldn't say it was a lie because I couldn't see Mark being connected with this guy in any other way.
Mark Duggan was not an angel. He had a criminal record. It's equally clear that he did not have a criminal record for very serious offences or serious violence offences, most importantly. And crucially, he did not have a record for being associated with or using firearms. Now, the same is not true of the person who supplied that weapon to him. And that man, Kevin Hutchinson Foster, appears to belong in a somewhat different category.
The intelligence at the moment is that Hutchinson has got control of at least one firearm, which he's going to pass to Mark Duggan, possibly at some point this evening. Boss, I'll hand back to you then.
I'll hand over to you for the method.
Good afternoon. I'm the V-59, Operational Firearms Commander.
As the police prepared to intercept him in possession of a gun later that evening, Mark Duggan was in Tottenham with his sister Paulette and partner Simone.
The last time I saw Mark was Wednesday. We was at Simone's house, and it was a nice vibe that day because the sun was out, we was in the garden chilling. Well, first it was the three of us were just sitting there drinking, and then I went home and changed and came back to Simone's because we was going to go to a barbecue.
It would be nice to have my brother with me.
I'll think about it.
What do you mean? Every time I'll think about it.
Simone went upstairs, and then it was just me and Mark left downstairs for about an hour. And me and him was like speaking about things like the relationship that I was in, things that were happening in his life, and things that his baby mothers were doing. It was quite strange because he was always aware that anything that he said to me, I'd say it back to Simone. So he wouldn't really go in depth. So that heart-to-heart that we had, I found it like it was quite moving.
And I'm going to tell her.
Don't rather listen to me. Shut your mouth, man.
I'm going to tell her, whatever.
Intelligence was coming in regularly. At the time that I deployed the surveillance team, Mark Duggan looked like he may be the most likely. But there was intelligence that it may not happen tonight, but it still hadn't been confirmed. So I sent a surveillance team. The director surveillance, etc., was all in place. So rather than just have them sitting at the police station, I sent them to the address where Mark Duggan was.
Hold on. Look, the guy's behind you. Look, see him there? Shoot him. Hold on, pause it. Yo.
The last time I saw Mark was on the Wednesday, the day before he was shot. He'd come round because I had a party coming up on the weekend and he wanted some tickets. But there was just something he mentioned, something about the police possibly following his car, his taxi. But that paranoia is acceptable in our culture, in our society, whatever, in our community, yeah. You don't even really pay no mind to it because it's not unusual to be followed for no reason.
Shout me in the morning, yeah?
Lawful 2-2, we've got Duggan in the car.
Walk one. I'm on the roads now, man.
Lawful 2-2, I think he's heading towards the farm. Got a few cars in front, please.
SCD-11, as you may have heard, are the Met Surveillance Department. They attempted to follow Mr. Duggan for a while on 3rd of August, but they lost him. They lost sight of him.
We're gonna lose him.
He's gone, Gov.
I received intelligence that Mark Duggan, at least at some stage on the 3rd, was not going to be involved in criminality. He was going to be involved in social activity that day. The intelligence, at the time I receive it, I would say is reliable. However, the people the intelligence is about aren't always as reliable as the intelligence, if you see what I mean.
He was just a normal gallus. That's what we'd use for a guy that, you know, has more than one woman. And he was a gallus.
You've been good girl tonight, ain't you?
At the time it happened, Chevy was 2.
The night before Mark passed, he was with Chanel, making the final arrangements for Chevet's christening, which was on the Sunday that Mark never got to go to.
We planned to have a christening on the 7th of August, which was a Sunday. We having a service at St. Francis de Sales Church and a little thing afterwards.
Yeah, it's not nice. Daddy loves you, okay?
Having lost their target, the police stood down early.
The intelligence picture, if I'm remembering correctly, was that this was probably going to happen the following night at around about 9 o'clock.
Now believing that Mark Duggan would receive a gun the next day, the Trident, surveillance and firearms teams arranged to come back on shift at 6 p.m. the following evening.
I remember specifically 2:05 he left out. The cab had come and it was 2:05. He was fine, he was telling me he's gonna come back. The day it happened, he said he would see me later.
Yes, boss. Shoreditch, please, yeah? I'm gonna tell you where to go when we get there, yeah?
Mark spent his last night at the home of his new partner, Precious.
I think the new love that he found was pushing him in directions to be a man. You know, you're a boy, you hang out on the street, you're not doing anything, you just play PlayStation. So now you've met this woman that's in a 9-to-5 job, going to work, living a good life. He needed to be more.
After Mark passed, we discovered that Mark had been in a relationship with Precious for 4 months, and she was pregnant. I remember, I think she said that he was in a bit of a mood and she couldn't be dealing with him, so she said, oh, I just went and got a bath. And he was getting ready to go. She said that when he come out of the bath, he was all right. Normal.
Yo, what's good? Yeah. I'm coming soon. I'll call you when I'm outside, innit? I'll call you when I'm leaving. Alright, in a bit.
He just asked to call a cab. And that was it.
House and Cars, how can I help?
Can I get a cab, please?
Picking up from McCorber Court.
McCorber Court. Where are you going to?
Vicarage Road.
Leighton.
Okay. Can I take your name, please?
Mark.
For Mark. I have, yeah. I'll give you a call when he's outside. He's on his way.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Their shift was due to start at 6 p.m, but at around 5:20, Trident's intelligence handler, who had come in early, received information that Mark Duggan would be collecting a firearm imminently.
Guys, Duggan's on the move. I'd like to get eyes on him now. Leighton, Vicarage Road.
Yeah, I know, Skip.
Go.
The team were still gauged for a 6 p.m. start. It's very unpredictable. Things change at the last minute and we have to respond quite quickly, as in this case.
Hello?
Boss, Duggan's on the move.
When? Yeah, wait for firearms.
While he waited for the firearms team, Trident's intelligence handler sent the unarmed surveillance officers he did have available on ahead.
We need you eyes on Vicarage Road, Leighton now.
Hello? Yeah, we did. We'll be down shortly, yeah? Thanks, bye.
See you later, man.
See you later.
That's it, What's up, mate? What's up, man?
Okay, yeah. How you doing?
It's hot.
He was mostly speaking on his mobile. He was normal, as a normal person, normal behavior.
He's so lame, is he?
Get my phone. Who is it?
I got the phone call from Mark to find out what I was cooking.
Hello?
Yo, Sim, you got my food? I don't want to hear nothing else. Food. That's all I'm calling you for right now, you know?
She's like, we didn't cook nothing. And then he was like, yes, you did. And then she said, yeah, we did, but it's for us. You're too greedy. Don't worry, you'll be fed.
I said, how long are you going to be? He said, I'm on my way. Mark saying on my way is just, you know, he's never on time for anything. So when he said on his way, I said, okay.
Okay, bye.
With the firearms officers now arriving, Trident's intelligence handler asked the firearms leader to brief his team and get on the road as quickly as possible.
And we've got 3 unarmed officers on the ground. We need CO19 to take over.
The objective now was to stop and arrest Duggan in possession of the gun.
I made sure, I spoke to Victor 59, made sure he was updated with intelligence, made sure he gave his staff the warnings that I'd given in the briefing the day before, just to make sure they were aware of the firearms warnings. Obviously, they're getting their equipment on, so they were in the yard, so I left them to get ready.
Listen in, guys. A firearm is to be fired only as a last resort. Other methods must have been tried and failed. The previous night, it was the SCD-11 surveillance team who, as mentioned in the briefing, are armed for their own protection. Therefore, they can respond to any threat posed to them. On the 4th, it was SCD-8 unarmed officers. I was concerned at this stage that they were trying to gain surveillance control of a male who was attempting to source a firearm, and I felt that we needed to be closer to them to respond to any threat to them.
The firearms team now had to play catch-up to get 6 miles across London to Vicarage Road in Leighton. If the secret intelligence was correct, the unarmed surveillance officers would soon be facing an armed man.
Yo. Yeah, I'm on my way to you now.
Before the shooting, the police, through their agencies, thought they knew who was going to supply the gun. Kevin Hutchinson Foster.
I'm on your road now, yeah? Or do you want me to wait?
Now, Kevin Hutchinson Foster was not unknown to the law. He'd been in prison.
Hey, boss man, just pull up here on the left. It's in between, just behind that.
Over here?
Yeah, just here on the left, yeah?
Okay.
Prison.
Hey, boss man, just pull up here on the left. It's in between, just behind that.
Over here?
Yeah, just here on the left, yeah?
Okay.
The gun that was eventually transferred was a gun that he himself had used previously.
A week before Duggan's death, Kevin Hutchinson Foster had used it to beat a man very badly about the head in an argument over a woman in a hairdressing salon. Now, he was caught on CCTV carrying out this assault. He was somebody involved in armed crime, somebody who had access to weapons, somebody who was therefore, you would think, of a special interest to Operation Trident, the Metropolitan Police Unit that deals with gun crime. And yet, he seems to have been this man of mystery.
They know he's got previous firearm charges, been arrested for firearm offences, and they know that he's got 3 handguns. They're looking to put these 3 guns onto the streets. Now, I would have thought common sense should dictate. Mark's only going for 1 and he's transporting it. This guy has got 3. That the focus of the operation should have changed to the major player.
You have to ask, why was nobody joining these dots? Why was Kevin Hutchinson Foster not the principal target of a police operation?
My intelligence says that Mark Duggan is going to pick it up. Let's follow Mark Duggan to where he's going to pick it up. Why would I want to go and follow Kevin Hutchinson Foster?
Were we to follow Hutchinson Foster, we would be following him blind, if you like. We wouldn't know what it was he was doing. I wasn't receiving any intelligence about Kevin Hutchinson Foster other than that I received about Mark Duggan.
By the time Mark Duggan arrived in Vicarage Road, 3 undercover police units were in place. But what happened next is disputed.
Vicarage Road, Skip. Still no sighting.
There are 2 contradictory versions.
Well, it's a busy thoroughfare. Numerous cars were going past me as I was sitting there, and at the time I saw it, yeah, I must have been sitting there for about 20 minutes or so, and I saw the minicab go past. It was the only minicab that went past me, and I know it's the only minicab that went past me because nowadays even black taxis have got a sticker in the rear window, and that was the only cab that I saw that day.
Skip, I've got him. Duggan's in a cab, Vicarage Road. Registration, Romeo 343.
Only one of the undercover surveillance officers could have seen the handover, and he said that the taxi turned a corner and went out of sight.
Well, it was in a line of traffic. It drove past me, it got to Birchall Road, turned left, out of my sight, and reappeared approximately 5 minutes later.
The taxi driver disputed this.
I was on Vicarage Road and the corner of Vicarage and Birchall Road. And I was parked in such that the traffic could pass by. A person came to the car, then greeted him with like, hello or Assalamu alaikum, and then was with him for about 5 minutes and gave him a box. And I don't think he was with him for more than about 5 minutes.
In evidence, the taxi's GPS system was examined and showed the vehicle stayed on Vicarage Road.
I'd rather believe the independent witness and the GPS system. So if the minicab didn't turn into Birchall Road, those Trident officers in situ should have seen the handover, and they should have at least got the other guy, especially if they knew that the other guy had another couple guns. We're asking, what's the relationship between Operation Trident, not CO19, the officers who shot and killed Mark, but Operation Trident, and the person who supplied him the firearm?
Skip, he's on the move. We all need to get behind him now.
We're on him.
The police say that they didn't see the handover, but somehow they knew that when he left Vicarage Road, Mark Duggan had a gun. How they knew this has never been revealed.
I have been clear from the outset that there are some aspects of this investigation which we are not able to put into the public domain. But it has been very important to me that I have had access to all the relevant intelligence. And what I'm able to say is that we are certain that when Mark Duggan arrived at the scene at Ferry Lane, he arrived in possession of the firearm, the non-police issue firearm that was found at the scene. He collected that firearm en route, and although no police officers saw the exchange, saw him being given it, the taxi driver who was driving Mark Duggan saw him receive the shoebox in which we believe the gun was placed.
Whether they found out through phone taps or informants, when Duggan left Vicarage Road, the police now considered him armed and dangerous.
Around about 6 o'clock, I asked Zulu 17 if he could confirm whether he believed Mark Duggan was in possession of a firearm and that he was in that vehicle, and he confirmed that, and I went to Amber.
All units, we are now code Amber. Repeat, code Amber.
Basically, going to Amber means that I've authorised the interception of that vehicle under the direction of the operational firearms commander at the safest possible opportunity they can do it.
Come on, team, go. We're on.
Keeping the minicab in sight 3 cars ahead.
Keep eyes on, firearms are still en route.
With the unarmed surveillance officers keeping Duggan in sight, it was now the job of the firearms team to catch up and stop him.
Hey, boss man, what, you selling this, yeah?
His mood was quite all right, and he asked me about selling my car because I had advertised the car. He asked me about information regarding buying the car.
Right, so how about I give you just over half, yeah?
Oh, we're getting closer.
It's never been established exactly when it happened, but it is known that Mark Duggan spotted at least one of the Trident undercover surveillance vehicles.
Mark sends a text to lots of his friends via a BB on BlackBerry, telling them that Trident had tried to jam him. He didn't say the police, he didn't say the feds, he said Trident. And in the black community, Trident are known as the gun police. He sent the text, he's looking for the car, doesn't see it, but doesn't know that Trident have now called in the heavy mob.
Actually, there was a good 5 minutes before Red was called that we had our eyes on the minicab because it was caught in very heavy traffic. So I can remember the firearms officers were able to identify exactly where it was because the surveillance officer's commentary on the radio was excellent. And she was able to say, it's behind this particular vehicle, 3 in front of my vehicle, and we had time to sit behind it.
Yo. Yes, brother, listen. Anyway, I'm coming to the farm now, innit, so...
You're going up against criminals who have access to firearms. Obviously, we're trained to use firearms, but there's definitely a bit of apprehension, a bit of nervousness, because you want to perform at the best of your ability.
At this stage, we had our blue lights and sirens turned off. However, at that stage, we could have overtaken that queue of traffic and implemented the stop. However, that would have been wholly inappropriate and dangerous. Therefore, we waited for the lights to change, vehicles peeled off left and right at the next set of lights, and we then found ourselves in Forest Road and were able to move through the traffic to the Ferry Lane area, which was the first safe place to stop the vehicle.
When we stop people, they have 3 options. They can either comply, as I've explained, yes, hands up, fair cop, gov, I suppose. They can either escape and attempt an escape, or they can fight their way out. So once we put the stop in, Mr. Duggan still had those 3 options in place.
I was conscious of one woman on a pedal cycle who was coming up behind the minicab. As the stop went in, I looked round just to check that she was not going to continue into the area where the stop was happening.
Strike! Strike! Strike!
At the point where I was alongside the minicab, somebody in my vehicle said something along the lines of, I think he's going to leg it.
He's raging! He's raging!
At this point, I've heard 2 gunshots, and then from the rear of his jacket, a load of feathers appear.
They were in the air behind him and all around him, really. It was quite a number of, quite a large plume of feathers.
Kind of know what a gun sounds like, do you know what I'm saying? I've never handled one myself, but I know what a gun sounds like. I just remember thinking, like, that gun sounds scary. It just sounded, like, expensive, do you know what I mean?
All of a sudden, I've heard 2 shots, two loud bangs, bang, bang. I'm thinking it's my phone. And one of my roommates running that time coming to me saying, yo, they're shooting outside, someone got shot.
Although footage of the area where the shooting happened was captured by passing buses, there was no CCTV of the actual moment, and no mobile phone footage of the shooting has ever been found.
One of the challenges of this case from the outset has been the lack of independent witnesses and the lack of recordings of the event. And for anyone who lives and works in London, the idea that something major could happen in a place like Tottenham and it wasn't captured on camera by either individuals with their phones or by CCTV seems really hard to believe. And it was equally hard for me to get my head around that as it has been for everybody else.
The incident was not captured by the data recorders fitted to the police vehicles, so the only direct accounts of the shooting itself are those of the police officers, the taxi driver, and one independent witness.
Yes, he's jumped out at pace, and initially he's facing towards Whiskey 42. And then at that time, I'm getting out of my vehicle and I take a couple of steps towards, and I've got my MP5 in the off-aim ready position.
When he's moved towards the back of the rear of the minicab and he's turned towards my colleagues, because of not being able to see the right hand inside the jacket, I've now got tunnel vision, if you want to call it, towards his body now, excluding everything else, concentrating solely on the shape of Mr. Duggan in front of me.
The only way I can describe it is like a freeze frame moment. You know, it's like you've got Sky Plus or a video recorder. It's where you start pausing things. And in my head, the world has stopped because as he's turned to face me, while I had lovely peripheral vision, my focus turned immediately to what was in his hand.
As the subject set off in a sort of half run towards me, I saw him very quickly pull his right hand up and out of his jacket.
I can see the handle of the weapon, I can make out the trigger guard, I can make out the barrel, and it's side on to his body, and there's a black sock covering that weapon.
As he's drawn the gun, my threat assessment was that it was an imminent threat to life because he was drawing that weapon in order to fire it at us.
If Mr. Duggan had left the gun like this, I would have hoped he would have dropped it. But because he's moved it away from his body, I now have an honest held belief he's going to shoot me.
What I've then seen is his elbow, his right elbow, move out slightly. It was minimal, yes, a few inches would probably be correct, but it was enough to make me shout what I did next.
He's reaching, he's reaching!
Shot fired, shot fired!
Where's the gun? Where's the gun? Where's the gun?
I keep running the moment through my head day in, day out, and Mark Duggan had a gun. He presented a threat to me, and the only option I had was to defend myself and to open fire.
I started shouting at him, "Where's the gun?" He was totally unresponsive and limp, but I was convinced that I'd find a gun either on him or under him. I think it, obviously appreciating that I only saw it for a split second and the manner in which it was drawn, and I don't see any details of it, just that it was a gun-shaped object, effectively. I wasn't aware that I was the only person, other than Victor 53, to see the gun.
In his initial statement, Whiskey 70 made no mention of the gun.
It was very apparent within a minute at most what had happened, in that Victor 53 had shot Mr. Duggan and the round had continued straight through and hit Whiskey 42.
It's something that I'll never forget, to be honest, because he's a mate of mine, and I went over to him, and again, the only way I can describe this is his knees started to go. I sort of called it an Elvis because his knees started to buckle under him. His face was initially red, but you could see the white just go down his face. So I grabbed him and I put him down against the fence line, telling him to, man up. And, a bit of cop humour, to be honest with you, as I'm cutting his clothes off because I'm looking for a bullet wound now. Touch wood, the round was in his radio and there was no obvious penetration in him. I've satisfied myself that Whiskey 42 has no life-threatening injuries, so I've dealt with Whiskey 42 for around 2 minutes. I've then gone back to Mark Duggan, who's a casualty now, and he needs attention.
Only one independent eyewitness to the actual shooting ever came forward. He lived in a block of flats directly opposite to where the incident happened.
I heard tires screeching, a couple of tires screeching, and then I heard shouting as well. The shouting was either put it down or get down. It was one of those two. I just started looking, viewing what was going on. I went to the window, stuck half my body out the windowsill, and then I started seeing everything, really. He had it looked like a phone clutched in his hands. I've said that from day one, and I will always say that it did look like a phone, and he had his hands up like that, above his shoulders, right near the face, The moment he got shot, that's when I went inside and got my phone and started recording. It was only about 2 seconds, 3 seconds at most, getting the phone. His body language was a bit like, what's going on? Really? With his hands up,
Independent experts were asked to investigate whether Mark Duggan could have had his hands up when he was shot.
I'm a pathologist, so I examine the dead body, document the injuries, but I also look at the scene of the death, and the order of the shots matters if you want to reconstruct the events, because the body positions are very different for the two shots. Now, there's good evidence that the first shot was the shot that struck the arm and the side of the chest, but didn't enter the chest. For the bullet to pass in here and out here, and to strike the side of the chest, the arm has to be turned. Now, that gunshot tore the fibers for quite a distance up the muscle, and that's a good indicator that the muscle was contracted at the time. And the muscle is contracted when you bend your elbow. And we have a police statement from 2 police witnesses that Mark Duggan's right hand was across his waistband. So we can corroborate that. The bullet that went into the chest went through the clothing. And unusually, it went in on the inside of the left front corner, out on the outer side, and then into the chest. So the garment had to be twisted up to the right and inside out. So we have an imagery now of Mark Duggan being shot in the arm. At the same time, his left hand was in his pocket, his right hand along the waistband, and he reacts to that by going forwards and raising his left arm. It's not possible that he was in a position of surrendering with both hands raised at the time of the first shot, because we know his right arm had to be down by his body and bent at the elbow.
They dragged me out of my car and they treat me like some kind of criminal. They dragged me with a very rough attitude, and then they laid me on the floor, and then they handcuffed me at the back. They ordered me not to look towards Mr. Duggan, not to look at the victim and to look away. It was quite a dangerous situation. There was blood on his clothes, and quite a few people were holding on to him, and his mouth was open.
Don't you look or I will shoot you! Stop looking!
Yes, the one that was standing by my head said, next to me, he had told me that he would shoot me. He had a gun in his hand. To me, it looked like these people had come out to hunt someone. That's what it looked like to me.
I always carried around this pretty good compact camera on the off chance that one day something might happen right in front of my eyes and I can just dig down there and get it. So I decided at that point, right, let's go take some photographs of whatever it is going on.
I was just there, just filming what was going on, like just still trying to find out what happened. Like, did anyone see exactly what happened? Like, well, I didn't see it. This one said they saw it, that one didn't. But everyone was just like literally fixed on what was going on.
I remember seeing a group of officers as well trying to resuscitate Mark Duggan. I remember he was on the floor, but at that time I never knew it was him. That's the thing.
At the time, I didn't know it was Mark. Like, nobody knew. Do you know what I mean? So from that distance, I guess he's fair enough where you might think he's a white dude. You know what I mean? And that's kind of generally where that came from. People that was there was thinking, oh yeah, some white dude. Might be an Albanian gangster. They've shot someone. Oh, at least it's not a black guy this time, innit? Oh, do you know what I mean? It was that kind of thing.
The feeling that I had in viewing that scene as I shot those pictures was one of chaos. I could see the way that the policemen were looking at each other, the way that they were talking to each other, some of the body language that they gave off.
Can you start moving the white place, yeah?
The way that sometimes they were, you know, a police officer would start walking one way but then flip around and walk the other way as if he didn't quite know whether he should do that or not.
Where's the gun?
After the shooting, a gun was found on the green next to where the minicab was stopped. Details of exactly where or when it was found were not recorded.
It took too long for that gun to be found. No one can tell me that 11 police officers can face an armed man, that man gets shot, and that gun not be found in a nanosecond. Because all 11 officers are trained to keep their eye and keep that focus on that gun?
The biggest issue has been, how did that gun get there? How did a gun get 14 foot over a fence? And even more, and nobody saw how it got there. And that has been the great mystery of this investigation.
There was also no agreement about who found the gun. At the inquest, 2 officers each claimed to have found it independently of one another.
I turned to Romeo 31, who at this stage wasn't undertaking any first aid or any other tasks, and asked him to look for the firearm.
Once I've started working my way along the bushes, occasionally I think, lifting some up, I think some of them are a little bigger than others, so I have a look behind them. Then as I'm walking down, get to roughly where the wall is, that's when I see, out the corner of my eye, something black lying in the grass.
Well, at some stage, I'm not sure exactly how long after it, I was on the phone to the SIO, and I could hear one of the firearms officers saying that they hadn't located a firearm. And I remember thinking, I wonder if anyone's looked to the left of the wall where it happened. And I just took a couple of steps down to the left. There's a little alleyway there. And the gun was just on the ground, on the grass, right there.
There's a problem with that. None of the trained police officers see a gun flying through the air on a sunny day with crystal clear vision. It's just not seen. Can they really have missed it?
I'm sure it would clear up a hell of a lot of stuff if I was able to say, yes, I saw the gun fly through the air and it landed wherever, but I didn't see it.
There was nothing obstructing my way, but I didn't clearly see what happened to that gun.
No, I don't see anything go over the fence.
The medical evidence, in terms of his wounds and his body position when he was shot, would give an idea about the possibility of him throwing the weapon. The 2 police officers say there's a gun in Mark Duggan's hand. But the gun ends up some distance away, over 5-foot railings. Mark Duggan is facing the 2 police officers. They're watching his right hand because they're looking for a gun. And he ends up in a position twisted, bent, and now he would have to throw the gun in that direction. He would need to do it with a wounded arm, in which, because of the damage to the muscle, he couldn't put his palm upright. So he would have to throw it palm down. For me, it's inconceivable that if he did achieve that, it was done without the 2 police officers seeing it. That leaves us with 2 possibilities. First possibility is that Mark Duggan threw it there before he exited the vehicle. Second possibility is the police planted it. There was allegations about police planting the weapon. That's outside my area. I can't comment on that. But it seems to me, from the evidence of the police officers, that the first sight they get of him, the door is already open and he is exiting the vehicle. So there was an opportunity for him to open the door, throw the weapon, and then step out. And that's what the jury concluded. That's what I concluded.
The inquest jury decided that it was only after Mark Duggan threw the gun that he was shot. The IPCC concluded that it was more likely that Mark was shot as he was throwing the gun. Neither version explains why there was no forensic evidence connecting Mark Duggan to the gun.
If this guy had had a gun in his hand when he was shot by the police officer, there's no DNA, there's no fingerprints, it would turn out there was no gun residue. There was just nothing connecting him to ever have been holding the gun and pointing it in the direction of a police officer or waving it around when surrounded by the police.
In terms of the forensic evidence on the gun or not on the gun, you can't explain why something isn't there. You can ask the question, does the fact that it isn't there mean absolutely this can't have happened? So does the lack of forensic evidence mean that he couldn't have had it? And the answer back to us forensically has been, no, it doesn't mean that. We might have expected to find it, we didn't find it. But there was nothing there that said, actually, this couldn't have happened, if that makes sense.
Well, my understanding was that the position of the gun was a pertinent and critical issue as far as the rest of the deliberations of the inquest, because of suggestions as to how the gun may have got there. We were specifically asked to track the movements, for example, of the 3 people that had been seen moving to the grassed area. R31, we indicate him as a yellow arrow. Z51 is identified as a blue arrow. And V59 is identified by a pink or purple arrow. I introduced this person, White Top, because I saw him on the footage. He seemed to interact with each of the 3 individuals at various times. As a result of that, I was asked then to write another report considering the movements of White Top throughout the same footage.
My role, if you like, that I assumed then was to be checking on, as I say, the scene as a whole, trying to make sure it's secure and also making sure my colleagues were okay, and that would be those giving first aid to Mr. Duggan.
All the other people within the scene seemed to be very focused in doing their own thing. Now, I didn't know whether White Top was coordinating activity or otherwise. He's moved in from camera left, off camera, walks all the way across, interacts with other people and moves around the area as a whole. And that was the thing that highlighted him to me in the first place, was he seemed to be touring the whole scene rather than being focused in any one area.
When the commotion happened, when they was doing CPR on Mr. Duggan, yeah, because all the officers' backs was towards me, all I could see was the officers' backs. So that's when I ran back over to the green where the handrails. An officer had gone into a car. I think it wasn't a boiler suit policeman, it was a regular police, right? He had taken the gun out of the car and he placed it on a black cloth in the palm of his hand, right?
The theory would be then that one of the police officers went into the taxi after Mark Duggan was shot, got the gun, kept it on his person, and then, in a pretense of looking for the gun, then planted it.
He moves behind the minicab and then appears to bend down and is obscured from view. Whether he accesses the minicab, I can't confirm because I can't see him. I can't see him do that. Whether he bent down and communicated with one of the officers around Mark Duggan, again, I cannot confirm that because he is out of view.
When I went back round the minicab, it was at the point where I believe someone's asked me to open up the extra medikit. I cannot be specific as to who it was. Somebody simply shouted for me to open up the second medic pack.
I can't, how can I put it? It happened, right? I don't remember everything, but one thing I do remember is that I saw an officer come out of the car with a gun.
Miss J has always maintained that she saw an officer coming out of the minicab with a gun, but there were inconsistencies in her accounts to the inquest and the IPCC, who concluded that her evidence was unreliable and contradictory.
There's no way you can be mistaken seeing a gun in Tottenham in broad daylight.
If you're going to have the presence of mind to think, oh, we need to plant this gun because it doesn't look good where it's been found, it's hard for me to then think you'd go through that process but not have the presence of mind to plant it somewhere useful to you. Actually, where the gun was found has caused huge problems for the police in terms of the plausibility and credibility of their accounts.
My team are very professional. No, we do not plant any gun at any scene. I find that highly offensive.
I was asked, actually, by the police to produce a review about the impact of emotion, like being involved in a shooting incident, how that impacts on memory. Under most circumstances, you know, police officers don't shoot people who are unarmed. Occasionally, there is sort of a perception of distortion. The person is lifting something and it's not a gun, but something else that the police officer believes is a gun and believes he is under threat.
We know that the police were told that Mark Duggan was dangerous, and that he was armed. And we know as a fact he did have a gun in the vehicle. He was stopped by armed police, and he did a run-up. And he ran into an armed police officer who was holding his gun in the shooting position. At the same time, he was making some body movements which could be interpreted as pulling a gun. He's got his right hand across his waistband area, and on the evidence of one of the police witnesses, his left hand in his pocket, as if he's fumbling for something, and he's using his right hand to assist from the outside. The only thing that was found on his body was a mobile phone. We don't know which pocket it was in. The police have no record of that. But the best bet is he had a mobile phone in his left pocket. He was trying to get it out. And in that split second, the police officer decided to fire. He was wrong about the gun being in Duggan's hand. But it's pretty hard to criticize that police officer in all the circumstances.
The common cognitive distortion that's reported is time slowing down. Everything seems to be like in slow motion, but it's likely to be a distortion. It doesn't have to be that they're lying. It means when you look at memory, memory is fragile. It is very easy to make mistakes.
As I was taking the photographs, I was forming that idea that there was something else going on there, that there was that confusion, that chaos. Those things together made me realise that this was a big piece of news.
Sometime between 6 and 6:30, a call comes into the news desk. Rare, because we're not normally the first port of call for people with breaking news. And someone said there'd been a shooting in Tottenham, and he had some pictures.
I said, right, I'll start getting the pictures off the camera, and I'll start figuring out a way of somehow getting them to you.
And I rang the Metropolitan Police press office. At about 7:25, I get a call from a press officer. And I say to him, look, this is really serious. This is what we think is happening. Can you confirm what's happened? He said, I don't know anything about it. I'll come back to you. 5 minutes later, nothing had happened. I ring him again. He then says to me, yes, all I can tell you is there's been an exchange of fire. Someone is dead and a police officer has been taken to hospital. We believe he's been shot. And I said, so there's been an exchange of gunfire. How is the police officer? We've got no idea on his condition. That's all I know. That was it.
The Metropolitan Police deny that they briefed journalists about an exchange of gunfire.
At the same time, it occurred to me, if there had been a shooting, the Independent Police Complaints Commission would have to be notified. So I rang their duty press officer. And almost word for word, he says exactly the same thing. We understand there's been an exchange of fire. Police have returned fire. A police officer has been injured and has gone to hospital, and someone has been killed. That's all we know at the moment. And actually, in the end, at 7:55, okay, that night, in the closing headlines, Krishnan Gurumurthy, was presenting at that time, says...
Breaking news, we're getting reports of a shooting incident in North London. It's understood that a young man has been killed. Scotland Yard have told us shots were fired and an officer has been taken to hospital. The Independent Police Complaints Commission has also been informed.
The head of Trident at the time, Stuart Cundy, called me. I think almost as soon as he'd heard. His duty was to inform me as the chair of Trident that a Trident operation had gone, had ended in this way. The next I'd heard was looking at the reports that were coming in.
Sejal, what more can you tell us?
Well, Mark, at about 6:15 this evening, there was an exchange of gunfire just beyond the second police cordon that you may be able to see behind me. During that exchange, a police officer was shot, after which firearms officers then opened fire and shot a young man dead.
Now, that wasn't what I had reported to me by the head of Trident. Nothing like a shootout.
We were mortified, absolutely mortified, Victor 53 in particular, because at no time did Victor 53 or his colleagues say that Mark Duggan had shot at them. So it was very disappointing that no one stepped up, perhaps, from the Metropolitan Police Service to correct that and speak to the Duggan family to correct that.
What it appears that happened is that a member of staff in a verbal briefing suggested that there had been an exchange of shots, and that was clearly wrong. It was never given out in any of our formal press releases, it was never written down, and therefore it took some time for us to find out that it had happened, and we apologised for that at the time, and it is something we are very sorry for.
The Metropolitan Police say they contacted the IPCC within 20 minutes of seeing media reports of an exchange of gunfire to tell them that they were not aware of this.
The IPCC put out that story, and very quickly, that was on the 4th of August, and on the 5th of August, they were made aware that the bullet that had gone into the officer's radio was police issue. So if they could be so quick to put out an erroneous story that was obviously wrong, you think that they should have, on the 5th of August, said, excuse us, we now know that Mark Duggan did not shoot. We now know that there wasn't a shootout. But they chose not to do it. Again, leaving that taint and leaving that innuendo and that idea out there in the British public psyche that a dangerous gangster who would open fire on police officers had been killed on the streets of Tottenham.
The notion of misreporting began. The notion of painting the victim, and I say the word victim in the sense that a man had lost his life. But the notion that somehow that he was responsible for his own death, all of that had begun.
We had no issues around the legality and the reasons that we shot Mark Duggan. But what we did have issues was that someone had said that he'd fired at police when he hadn't. And that's when we wanted a senior officer to step up and correct that false information. Sadly, they didn't. And rightly or wrongly, we made a decision, and I phoned up Sky News and let them know and said, we need to correct this information.
The picture that they have of Mark, I don't even know how they could use that picture to portray him as a gangster anyway, because they've cropped that picture and used that picture like it's something bad that he was doing. But that picture is him at his daughter's graveside.
That was really depressing to know that this big industrial machine of the media is going to power play these lies until they become part of people's psyche, I guess. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And as far as they're concerned, that guy shot a police.
The Metropolitan Police say there is no evidence that they engaged in a spin operation after the shooting, or that they exaggerated the extent of Mark Duggan's involvement in crime.
I got a phone call from his brother Marlon to say there's been a shooting in Tottenham Hale and he thinks it's Mark.
We both looked at one another and said he can't be hurt because, like, he's on his way here.
The phone rang and it was beside me and I saw it was Simone. Then it rang off.
I went down to the scene and I said to the officer, I think my partner's there. They said, who's your partner? I said, Mark Duggan.
I rang back Simone and she said that they were at the scene. But she said some officers told them that somebody's been airlifted to Whitechapel Hospital and it might be Mark, so they should go there.
The rest of the family had all headed over to the hospital where they had been advised that Mark was gone in the helicopter, the air ambulance. Only when they got there to realise that Mark hadn't, it was the officer that was there. So we had to drive back to the scene.
Everything was taped off and he was trying to talk and he was still getting no answers. The police officer turned around and said to me, well, the person that's laying on the floor is Indian. So I was like, Indian? Yeah, so it can't be your brother, like that.
And then another officer came and they took me round to the back of Tottenham Hale Station. I've showed them a picture on my phone and I said, this is what Mark looks like. And then the other officer called that officer that was talking to me and said, yeah, I heard him say it is him.
At that point, when they said that, I remember like letting out a scream that it felt like it came from the bottom of my stomach. And when I looked over at Simone, her head was down and she was just sobbing. She started to scream, my sister started to scream. So I just ran. But it just, everything just seemed to be going in slow motion at that time. And I was like, okay. But by the time we came out of the train station, it was just like, everybody was just there, like.
I left the scene with Paula and I went to Mark's mum. And it was just heartbreaking. She was just oblivious. She didn't know anything. I thought the police would have contacted the parents before I got there, and that hasn't been done. And then we're hearing it on the news. We're all sitting down watching it on the news, and it was just crazy because we didn't have no answers. Why? Why was he shot? How come he got shot? How come no one ain't telling us what's going on?
So throughout the 4th, the Duggan family, Mum and Dad, Bruno and Pam, are hearing all this on the TV. And I remember his mum saying that she just kept on thinking to herself, as long as no one comes to the door and says it's true, then maybe it's not true. Maybe there's some terrible mistake happening out there. So they waited all the next day, which was the Friday, the 5th of August, and nobody came. So on the Saturday, we decided to go to the police station in the expectation that they would do what they had to do. And let me be clear, if anybody gets killed, murdered, or simply dies on the streets of Britain, the police service delivering a death message to the family. We went to Tottenham police station and I would say it was a joke, but because of the outcome, you can't dismiss it as being a joke.
We're there knocking on the police door. This is a public police station and they've closed the door. And we're saying, well, we're waiting for somebody to come and explain to us what has happened to Mark Duggan.
And then it took them hours to present somebody as the top officer. But all he wanted to do was take Simone in the station and help her to write a complaint. And we wasn't there to make a complaint. We were there to get someone to go to the family home. So that became unacceptable.
And every time one of us stepped up on the step, they'd say, could you step down off of the step? But we want to know if somebody's coming out, somebody will be with you shortly. But we've been here 2 hours. We've been here 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. You know what, we're going. And just said, okay, let's take the kids away and, you know, leave. And we did. We left peacefully. I could say it was until I reached to Bruce Grove itself, where the bridge was. And I looked back. I was like, hold on a minute. Is that car on fire?
If you look at other shootings, one way Duggan is different is this is a shooting with real consequences. They were the worst riots in modern English history. People died in those riots.
The death was followed by the most destructive riots in British history. Inevitably, people had a very negative view of Mark Duggan. I think the view of a lot of people was, well, you know, here's this guy, he actually shot at the police, and look what his mates have done now. They've torched London and other cities. There was, therefore, I think, very little sympathy for the broader issues about whether this should have happened in the first place.
The police never did go to the Duggan home to inform his parents of their son's death. The family had to wait 2.5 years to receive the official verdict.
Today, his family heard an inquest jury conclude that his killing by police was lawful.
We came for justice today. We don't feel that we're leaving with justice. We feel we're leaving with a grave injustice.
Even if a police officer is wrong, so in this case, he shot claiming Duggan definitely had a gun and he didn't have a gun, according to the jury verdict, even if that's the case, it's lawful. Lawful doesn't mean you were correct in what you said. It means that you didn't break any laws in what you did.
To me, that lawful killing verdict is a huge pain and a huge reflection of the relationship that there is between the police and the black community, where nobody has been brought to justice, where nobody's been able to account for what happened. It is almost as though, as the community would often say, the police are able to act with impunity, something that has been historic and something that just hasn't gone away.
For the police, The Lawful killing inquest verdict and the IPCC report which followed have closed the book on the death of Mark Duggan. But for his friends and family, not being able to see the secret intelligence means that they cannot move on.
They want to sit in court and reel off all this fictional criminal history that belonged to him. But yet you cannot tell us, factually, why Mark was under surveillance, why you were following him, what was he doing. You say you know, but you can't tell us.
I actually thought for a little while, coming up to the verdict, when the Met really believed they were going to lose, and they did believe they were going to lose, there was a time when it appeared that maybe even they wanted to find a way to ensure that this didn't happen again. But they won the verdict, and we're as far apart now as we probably have ever been.
Even for some of those who investigated the case, a sense of unease remains.
What we're trying to do is search for the truth. And it's not very satisfying when you put so much effort into search for the truth and you can't be absolutely certain that you found it. It leaves that sense of kind of, you know, is there something out there? So I understand why people want to find it. Am I optimistic? In all honesty, probably not.
It may be that in years to come we will learn more about what really went wrong and why this, to my mind, avoidable death took place. And if we do, maybe there will be some sort of catharsis, as has finally happened with the Hillsborough inquest.
So far, all the publicity about Duggan doesn't even begin to address the fundamental issues about intelligence. My whole point at the inquest was, this need never have happened.
I see Victor 53 on a regular basis now as a friend, and there's not a day or a moment that I've spent with him over the last 4 years or so that has ever led me to believe anything other than he told the truth and that he did the right thing. Does he regret shooting Mark Duggan? No, because he did his job. He did his job that day, and he believed that Mark Duggan was a dangerous threat to him, his colleagues, and the public.
You're going to sit in front of me and my family and tell me that you're happy with the way it went. That's the best outcome that we could have had there. Yeah? My brother's dead. His children can't see him anymore. His brothers and sisters can't see him anymore. His mum, who's been torn completely apart, can't see him anymore. His dad, who gave up on life because of it, can't see him anymore.
Really and truly, it's for the kids now. It's for closure for them kids, you know? And it's not going to be a closure for me, never, in a million years. It'll never be a closure. Never. Because he still took my son's life.
This is Mark Duggan's daughter. And this is Kalia. This is another one of Mark Duggan's daughters. And they just want to say a quick little word on behalf of the family. So I'm going to hand over to Shania.
I'd like to say a poem that I made up. He went away without farewell. He said goodbye to none. But heaven's gate was open wide, and a loving voice had come. Beside his grave we often stand, our hearts are tired and sore. But through the gloom there comes the words, not there, just gone before. R.I.P. Daddy.
That was beautiful. That was really beautiful. That was really beautiful.